This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 133 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we were joined by former ESPN star Kenny Mayne. There's never a bad time to have somebody as entertaining and successful in the business as Kenny is and has been. He joined to talk about his current golf podcast, We Need a Fourth, with Cooper Manning and Brian Baumgartner, who is also Kevin from The Office. And then we talked about the recent news, but also the old story of Kenny revealing he was banned from the Masters and Augusta National for a joke that he made about the golf club earlier in his career. Of course, we talked extensively about his ESPN career, anchoring SportsCenter, working with Dan Patrick, working with Stuart Scott, and a lot of the other things that he was able to do at the network, like Mayne Street. Kenny also talked about his start in broadcasting, his football career, his garbageman career, and his foundation, which helps wounded veterans get the help they need to walk and run again. We covered a lot. It was a really fun conversation with one of the best in the business. So please make sure you rate and subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page and enjoy this week's episode of the Awful Announcing Podcast with guest Kenny Mayne. All right, he was a longtime SportsCenter anchor and ESPN personality. He can throw a wiffle ball faster than Ken Griffey Jr. Now he hosts the golf podcast, We Need a Fourth, with Brian Baumgartner and Cooper Manning. He is Kenny Mayne. Kenny, thanks so much for joining us on the Awful Announcing Podcast today. Has Augusta National been doing any damage control in the last month? Like, have they called to invite you to the Masters after you made those headlines saying you were banned?
By the way, it looks like a hostage video from my end. It's some workers here, and I'm up in the, what is this? The room I never go into, where my daughter stays here. Yeah. So
yes, even with that, just the lone light in the background too.
What's that thing called? Room Raider. That's a good site. They make fun of people for their terrible backgrounds. Yeah. I got 4 in top 5 right here. Yeah, it's funny. That's a real story and a fake story at the same time, which that's kind of true with everything. I think. So years and years ago, I used to cover golf for ESPN. I did the TPC Sawgrass, and I did the U.S. Open, for 7-8 years in a row. Me, Van Pelt, Andy North, the whole thing. And I would always do my silly little stories, like the pretend stories I did for the NFL show, right?
Right.
And on one of them, I didn't remember what the line was. It was to the effect, "See you from the Masters. I'll be bringing 4 ladies with me," or something to that effect, right? And they really did get upset. They really did call ESPN. Even they called the truck while we're still on the air. And what the hell, and my boss is like, no, he just does jokes. It's all free time. He's not really going to do that. But I never was invited to go cover the Masters. I was covering horse racing at the time, so there is a chance that's the only reason. But I decided to say that I've been banned for life for the Masters because it's just funnier.
Yeah.
But somehow, I didn't know how. I think I was on somebody else's podcast is how it started a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think it was with Stu Gotts.
Right. And then somebody either heard it or saw it in print. They didn't hear my voice. The old thing about when you deliver a line, you got to kind of know the tone. You got to know the context. And next thing you know, I'm being written up in like Sports Illustrated, Golf Digest, and what the hell's going on? Our bosses for We Need a Fourth, which is the Smartless guys, they were like, keep it going. Do a response. They didn't give a damn about the truth of it. They just liked that my name was out there and then people might hear about our show. The old any publicity is good publicity. But I am invited to Hootie, Darius Rucker's golf tournament the day after the Masters. So I'm getting close.
Okay. Do you think so you mentioned that your bosses at your podcast liked it. Do you think the people that run Augusta National, if they saw that story or just the headlines, were they a little embarrassed by it? Do they want to correct it? Or do you think that that's something that they might even be proud of?
To have my name, it's like the people who aren't allowed to go in casinos, their faces up there. In fact, I just heard a great podcast about the guy that ripped off the Bellagio on a motorbike. You know that story?
No.
Oh, it's insane. It's worth your time. A guy, he was desperate and he decided the best way to get even was to go into the Bellagio at 3 a.m. and steal chips from the craps table and he pulled it off. He got out. It's a fascinating story, but his picture, I'm sure, is at the Bellagio. It's what reminded me of that. Who knows? They may have a better sense of humor than we think. It was maybe just one guy who called, who even knows? It's so long ago. I literally think it might be 20 years ago. It's forever ago.
Yeah. And I have to imagine, though, if you wanted to go to the Masters, like Cooper Manning could probably get you in. Like if you show up there with Cooper and Peyton, like you're getting into the Masters.
Well, yes and no, because Cooper said he's going to stay as far away from me as possible. He doesn't want to jeopardize his own standing. Who knows? Kevin from The Office, Brian Baumgartner, my other partner in that show. Those two guys seem to be in a different golf arena than I. I'm like a Muni guy. I'm playing at Rockledge and Topstone and places you've never heard of. These guys are at elite country clubs all around the nation. Would I go and play at some of them? Hell yeah. I don't. It's not my normal. I'm usually one of my friends. Hey, you want to golf on Tuesday? What time's free? And somebody picks a local course and we go play. We're very average. We're just happy to be outdoors.
Who is the best golfer between you, Cooper, and Brian?
Brian, easily. Brian's probably 6 or a 7 or something. I don't even have a real number. They're mad at me because I don't have an official number that I promised in 26. That's my goal. But the problem is, I'm in Connecticut most of the time. We still have 1.5 feet of snow and more's coming right now.
Yep.
We just recovered our mailbox. Our mailbox got knocked over by one of the city plow people, and it was buried in 6 feet of snow. Like we went without mail for a couple of weeks. We just didn't care. But we found the mailbox, and it's back on top, and we're getting mail over here again.
Yeah, I'm on Long Island, so we were just hit with that same storm. We got about 2.5 feet from that one.
Where's my one-eyed kitten? Just in case you wanted to see this guy, Winston. Here he is.
Cute. And that you have a dog as well. We basically have a lot of posts about your dog.
We have an expensive kennel, I would say. We have 2 dogs and 3 kittens.
Okay.
And then additionally, my wife volunteers at an animal rescue farm, and she also likes to attract really birds, squirrels. She thinks she's Snow White. But it makes her happy, and she has a great heart. She looks after all the animals. But yeah, we lost our big dog Jed back in November. That was a bad week. I lost my best friend and my best dog in 1 week, and we decided to adopt a new dog soon after. So we got Benson, who I sent you a picture of. He's on the internet today. He's already like 75 pounds. He's ridiculous. He's 4.5 months. He's Bernard. He's Bernice. He's Doodle. He's a little of everything.
We have 2 dogs, Australian Shepherd, Great Pyrenees mixes. Oh. They're about 70 pounds each. And then actually they're a lot of fun, but it was our 2-year-old son who pooped and peed on the kitchen floor this morning without a diaper on. So
yeah, we felt like we were raising a baby again. We're old. I'm older, and is like, are you kidding? Like, you're up at 3 or 4 times a night, but he's turned the corner. We think he's going to behave now, and we're happy, and they keep us young. We got 4 daughters. They're all over the place. So these are like our children now.
I want to get back to the podcast for a minute. How did that golf podcast start? Like, again, We Need a Fourth with Cooper Manning and Brian Baumgartner, which you mentioned, Kevin from The Office. How did that start? Did the 3 of you know each other before that podcast?
I knew Cooper a little bit. He helped me get Peyton for a story, 20 years ago when he was with the Colts. I wanted to do, how Peyton always took forever to get the playoff. So the premise was that he speaks a rare form of Gaelic, and Jeff Saturday would have to interpret it for the other guys who speak regular Gaelic. So that's how I first got to know Cooper. And then all the Mannings, Trey Wingo, me, JB Smoove, all of us did some stuff for Caesars for a few years. So got to know each other better that way. Brian I'd never met. It's funny, Smartless came to me with a different idea a couple years back, and I couldn't do it just because of schedule, and also politically I couldn't do it. It was basically to make fun of the New York Knicks owner, and Caesars had a relationship with. I was like, I'm not going to do a 1 episode podcast and risk all this. So but we stayed in touch and we started kicking around like what would be a good show, what would be a fun show.
Yeah.
And golf kind of came up, and I don't know how they reached out to those two, to be honest. I've never really heard the end of it. Just, hey, what do you think of Cooper Manning? I said, love him, I've known him for a while. What do you think of Kevin from The Office? Yeah, let's go. So they just threw it together, because a lot of people say, like, how the hell did you three? It's like, it just happened. How do different people get on sitcoms? How do different people get in movies? Like, it's really the same thing. They just cast people to put them in roles. And the great part was the first time we all got together as a group, we got to go to Scotland. The guys from Travis Matthew throw this big event over at the Old Course, and we were hanging out for 3 or 4 days, eating good food. And
oh wow, pretty good start.
What a great way to, like, hey, we're doing this thing. We were playing with Austin Reeves and who else was out there? Fat Perez, the golf influencer guy, and the guys from Country Club Adjacent. They were there. A whole bunch of other people. And it was an amazing event and a thrill to get to play at the Old Course.
Very cool. Were you a fan of The Office?
Oh yeah. I don't have every episode memorized necessarily. Yeah. Like sometimes I'll see. We just saw one the other day. It's like, how did I never see that episode? But yeah, it's on in our house often. It's almost like background. Sometimes you're watching, sometimes it's just there. It's comfortable TV. Yep. And yeah, huge fan of that show.
Has Brian ever watched Mayne Street?
He referenced it once, like he kind of knew, but I don't know that he was a devotee of that, like back. And that's a long time ago. That's 2005, 26. For those who don't know, we did a little situation comedy at ESPN. This is before all the apps, right? This is just ESPN.com. You had to go find it.
Yeah.
But we had a bunch of stars in that thing. Aubrey Plaza, Allison Becker, John Glazer, Ben Schwartz, Chris Smith. John Mulaney was in one episode. I'd forgotten he was, like, who's this guy? Like, he wasn't John Mulaney yet.
Yes.
And obviously it was a great feeder program for Parks and Recreation. They all left me behind and they all went on that show.
How did that show start? Like whose idea was Mayne Street? Is that something that you pitched, or did ESPN come to you?
No, I had a couple good friends, Josh Shelov and Todd Pellegrino, and kicked around this idea. What if there was a way to do sort of, because even ESPN.com was relatively new, right? I mean, yeah. Remember when I first got to ESPN, we used to like make fun of the internet people. Like, hey, you guys have fun on the computer over there. We'll be reading the Newark Ledger over here. And this is early 2000s, 2005, 6, whatever. And it was kind of experimental. It was something ESPN had never done, but John Skipper, coincidentally, I just talked to him yesterday about a different thing. And he said that, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And it had critical success, and it was kind of getting momentum. And then they just kind of killed it. And nobody ever gave me a great explanation why, but I don't think it was because it was no good. I think they just didn't want to go down that. ESPN.com was known for, here's your football column, here's your baseball stats. And this was such an oddity. I think had there been the ESPN app and all the social stuff and the way to export it,
yeah,
it might have had a better chance.
Were you part of the casting of that show?
Yeah. What's really funny is we had this role for the producer, my, individual producer, which became Allison Becker. And for whatever reason, it's no knock on Aubrey at all, but for whatever reason, Allison just kind of made more sense, the way we played off each other.
Yeah.
But after they left, we were like, well, we can't let the other girl go. Like, let's just make up a different, like, she's too good not to see if we can get her in the show. That's Aubrey Plaza, obviously, very talented. And we just made up a new role. She became the boss of both of us, an executive who played it in a very funny and mean way. She was great.
Are you still in touch with Aubrey at all? Like, does she credit Mayne Street with kind of setting her on the path to stardom?
She had better say that. Like, when she wins an Oscar and goes through all the list of people, no, I think she acknowledges that, yes, that was one of the first quote unquote national things.
Yeah.
All of them, they were young. And she's obviously gone on to do amazing things. I stay in touch with all of them. John Glazer, he's still doing great stuff. Ben Schwartz and I just sent notes to each other the other day. So I consider them all friends. And I wish there were a way to, some reiteration of that whole thing would be fun. But I think I'm too mid-famous at this point. I need somebody more famous to make this thing get off the ground.
The Nadal episode with Scott Van Pelt.
Yeah.
And I just have to say how much I appreciated the shout out to Rafi in that episode, because I loved Rafi growing up. My kids now love Rafi, and like I'm always surprised because they're most of my friends and even extended family with kids, like they have no idea who Rafi is, which that always kind of shocked me. So did your kids actually like Rafi, or did somebody just write that line for you and you were like, I have no idea who Rafi is?
Honestly, it was either written or Allison freelanced it. I can't remember, but for those who don't know, it was literally the first episode of Mayne Street, right? And the premise was called Fixes, and Scott Van Pelt and I are playing ourselves as SportsCenter anchors, and I keep screwing up Rafa Nadal's name, and take 3, take 4, and the clock's ticking. So for those who don't know, whoever, it's still in existence today, whoever does the last SportsCenter, if it's going to re-air the next day, you got to clean up any messes. If I screwed up some hockey names, or sometimes there'll be a wrong stat, somebody had 22 rebounds, not 21 or whatever. And you want to clean it up so that when it repeats, we're factually correct. So that was the premise. And I keep screwing up Rafa Nadal, and they're just begging me to say it right. And Scott's telling me about his marriage is breaking up. His counselor, Vikram, was a really funny line. I think Josh wrote that one. But yeah, that was fun. It's still findable. I think you just Google my name and the word Fixes and you can see it.
Were there ever times when you were doing that late night SportsCenter where you did have to stay for hours doing corrections like that episode? Like was that loosely based on a true story?
It was tightly based on it, I would say, more so. I mean, everybody who ever did what back in the day, way back in the day, was the 2:30 a.m. SportsCenter Eastern.
Yeah.
It was a half hour. I think Tirico did that show for a time in his life. And then it became the hour that went from 1 to 2 and sometimes 1 to 2:30. And again, like I say, if there were mistakes, they rolled the wrong tape, anything. Usually the anchor's fault or bad information, and you got to clean it up. And so, yeah, we had many a night where, again, the snowing, you can't even get your car out of the driveway. It's like 4 a.m. So we suffered, all of us who did the late show, everybody suffered through that. And it just became a thing. Stan Verrett always had a funny way of looking at it, trying to keep people's spirits up. And in LA, it was much easier because it was 10 o'clock. A bad night there is midnight. A bad night in Connecticut's 3 or 4 a.m, right?
Yeah.
But he would equate it to, we're in a football game. He's like, we're up 24-17. They're driving. We have to stop. He kind of put everybody in a sports framework about where we stand with regard to getting out. Because as much as you wanted to do the show, it's like any other job, right? You fight to get the job, but then when you're working, you want to go home, right? Yeah. You want to get the job over with. You want it to be a good show. So everybody would always commit to that much, level of participation. But there'd always be somebody, or I could make people laugh during the Fixes. They get mad at me because I'm screwing around. I'm just out there, being myself, but making people laugh at 2:40 in the morning when everybody wants to go home isn't called for it. They want just be serious, say the words, get the hell home.
I mentioned my kids are still like Rafi. I usually don't reference my kids this much on the show, but if I were to tell them right now that I'm talking to somebody who was on ESPN, that's going to mean nothing to them. But if I say that I'm talking to somebody who was once a garbage man, that's going to be a very big deal. And I know you've probably given this timeline a thousand times before, but you were a garbage man, then you were a TV reporter in Seattle, then you went back to working as a garbage man before getting to ESPN. Is that correct? Is that how it went?
That's the chronology. Actually, I had a couple more jobs after, but yeah, I played football at UNLV, and my summer job when I came back home, I think one summer I stayed in Vegas, the others I came home, and I was a garbage man. I was the guy that hung on the back of the truck. And was the swamper is what they called us. And I'd jump off and you grab your can and you dump their stuff in your can and you take it back to the truck and you drive around the neighborhood, right? And years later, I had a TV job in Seattle. I quit it on kind of short notice. And I called up the garbage guy again and said, hey, I'm trying to figure out, what I'm doing next. Is there a chance I could come on, even a couple days a week? The problem was, they were down to one-man crews. They had the claw, which most neighborhoods now have, right? They didn't need the swamper. And I always say, like, the industry had passed me by during this time. And he said, all I have for you, we need garbage cans assembled. If you want to make $10 an hour for a few weeks, come on down to Kent. And I did. So I'm like on TV on a Friday. On Monday, I'm making garbage cans. And then I ran out of cans. I was working so zealously, I ran myself out of a job. And I looked in the paper and there was an ad. It said marketing company, radio or TV experience bonus. I'm like, they're talking to me. Turned out it was a telemarketing company. So now I'm selling, and no offense to anybody doing that. There's still good sales jobs in that field, but it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so I was selling prepaid legal insurance for about 6 weeks. During that time, ESPN called me. I'd already been interviewed once. That's probably why I quit the job in the first place. I thought I was above that place, and like, fuck you guys, I'm going to ESPN. Little did I know that I was first going to assemble garbage cans and sell prepaid legal. But I got interviewed again, still didn't get hired. Then I quit that job and I started working in sales for MCI. This is, again, dating myself. Some people didn't know any of that existed, right? You just have cell phones, unlimited calling.
Yeah.
But there was a long period in our history where you had to choose Sprint or MCI or AT&T or whatever. And I sold long distance while freelancing for ESPN. And it took like 3.5, 4 years before they finally broke down and hired me. This is when they added ESPN2. Stuart Scott moved up to be the anchor next to Susie. Keith went back to Dan on Channel 1. They needed one more guy. And that was a long time ago, May of 94.
And did you get your media start in Seattle, or were there smaller markets that led to Seattle?
The very first one was, I got $50 a story, probably an NCAA infraction, but I think I can report it now. I had one more credit to get my degree. I was done playing football. This is the spring of my senior year. Needed literally one science credit. Excuse me. And I got a job for the local PBS station, so KLVX. And those PBS shows on Sundays, they're like 2 to 3 o'clock. They're talking about community affairs or whatever. So I would do the setup story about the subject that they were going to sit on the panel and discuss. And they were so bad. I still have them. It would be painful to look back at them, but it'd be a really funny exercise. Like, they weren't very well edited. My voice is like, Las Vegas officials. They're just the terrible reporter voice, the whole thing. But I got it right during that period. I got a call from my coach, and he had sweet talked the Seahawks into looking at me because they wanted the kid who played ahead of me. I was second string, but he turned him down. He was going to go to Canada or something. And Tony said, if you like Sam, you'll like Kenny. He throws as well or better, right? So I got to go try out. Steve Largent comes walking out of the building. He's my receiver. I was like, okay, this is helpful. And I signed a contract, but I failed the physical like 3 weeks later when we got to Cheney because I ruined my ankle playing football my junior year, and they weren't willing to take the risk on a guy who wasn't, I wasn't that notable coming in. I was probably strike insurance, so they needed more people to fill out the lines, during preseason.
Yeah.
Which funny that I'd sent you a note on that about my foundation. It all ties back together that all these years later, that bad injury, kind of like the good of that came out because I found this guy who has this device and it lets me play golf. It lets me I played flag football at the Super Bowl. I can do anything with this device on, but I can't do it without it, right? If I just wore regular shoes, my ankle would totally blow up. So I usually wear flip-flops or slippers or my leg brace. And we started a foundation called Run Freely, and we raise money, and then we send the money to the guy in Gig Harbor, and he makes the next one for the next guy or girl in line. And we've helped, I think, about 60 or more at this point through several years of doing this. So it's really cool. It changes in an instant. It changes your life. It sounds like, when you fall asleep on the couch and there's some infomercial about some bullshit that's not true, and you're like, this is true though. It sounds ridiculous. Like, how could it be? Because most of the people have ankles like mine or worse that just don't work. Like I have no bend. It doesn't move. And other people suffered it for various reasons through the military. But yeah, it's been a blessing for me and a blessing to kind of help others, get back into life.
I didn't realize that. So you ended up using the product, the brace, before you even started that the foundation.
Yeah, I had another brace that I got in California, and it was good, but it just, like, I told Jim Zorn, who had a wrecked left ankle, and I told him about this guy in California, so he went and got one of those. Then I found out about the one in Gig Harbor, and I said, Jim, you're in a station wagon. I'm in a Ferrari. Okay, you need to look at this other one. So, and again, no knock. The other one was helpful. This one just kind of has it just works better. You know, it opens up. You can get it on and off sooner, quicker, and it's, you know, I probably wear it later today when I go for a walk. Like, I need it to do stuff. Otherwise, my ankle suffers for the stress that you put on it regularly.
Do you think that your ankle could have held up to give you a stint in the NFL?
I think I was destined. I don't think I was going to be Joe Montana. I had a good enough arm, like,
yeah,
you know, like, you just know, like, if you're an athlete, whatever the sport is, whether you're in the hitting cage or whether you're shooting threes or throwing footballs, like, you kind of look around like, oh, I don't feel out of place here. Like, I threw as well or better than most of the people that were out there. Was I good enough to really play in the league? Who knows? I was a better thrower than a quarterback, I guess is the best way to say it.
So what was the tryout like? Were you just throwing, or was it like, did you
it wasn't, they didn't
wasn't
put me
like
through all the
practice or
measurements.
anything?
No, it was more Steve comes out, they said, hang on, we're going to get somebody to come out and run routes. It was very ad hoc, right? And there was an Australian guy that was trying to be a receiver. They were just giving him a look. And then there was Steve Largent, who already was a receiver. And, you know, just say, hey, run me a 12 and out, run me a 15-yard post. You know, we just called different plays or different routes and probably threw for 15 minutes. And Jerry Rome was the quarterback coach. And I still remember Dick Mansberger was the player director. He had come from Dallas. And he said, Jerry Rome said, you're not terrible, so we're going to offer you this, you know, rookie-looking contract. I think it was, I wish I should remember, but I don't. I feel like it was 25, 35, 45, something like that. It was 1982.
So it was a multi-year contract.
Yeah, you know, at their discretion, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I remember Dave Craig being pissed that my second year was higher than his first contract second year, and he went on to have a really good career. But he always tells the story. It's not true, but it's a funny story that, you know, I went and I did on the first day of camp over at Cheney. They used to go to the other side of the state for their camp, and they put me on the Cybex machine. It was sort of like a lie detector. It had like little graphs, and I was working both legs, right? If I knew that it was to determine whether I thought it was just another test, like a bench press or running the 40. So I'm in there struggling, being a big man. I would have cheated. I would have gone easy on my good leg and hard on my bad leg, and they would have looked closer together.
Yeah,
but
see the balance.
The variance was such that, you know, it just wasn't worth it to them. This guy, we're going to cut him anyway. We don't need to be paying him to go get hurt for us. You know? But Dave says when I came back down, he was like, well, since you got cut, hey, can you get me a 12-pack and bring it back before the airport? I could see him saying that, but, you know, he didn't.
What was your reaction when you ended up getting cut? Like, you had this contract, you thought you had this contract, and then it was the physical that made it so that you were getting cut.
Well, they took me to the Spokane airport and they gave me airport meal money. It was a 5, 4 ones and 4 quarters. I'm not making that up. It was $10. That's all I made from the NFL. My reaction was I went into depression for sure. Like, it was so devastating because I was such a long shot to get looked at because I really didn't do that much at 4-year. JC, I was pretty good, but at UNLV, I broke my leg my junior year and played a little bit. My senior year, I wasn't like a big star or anything, but I thought I was getting better. So, like, what did it matter what I had done? I kept trying. Like, I, you know, tried out a couple of USFL tryouts or CFL. Just, it was always, what have you done before? I was with the Seahawks. What happened? I failed a physical. You know, like, okay, yeah, we're not going to look at you. But it's funny, I got my TV job, my first real TV job, out of a newspaper want ad. This is back when people read newspapers, and they have the want ad section. We'll have to learn up your audience, along with Rafi. And it just said, you know, looking for a college graduate, you know, entry-level job. And it's this little station in Tacoma. It's the Seattle Tacoma market, but our station was physically in Tacoma mostly. They had a Seattle office too. And I came in, my first thing to do was to rip apart the script paper and distribute it to the anchors and the director and the producer, listen to the fire scanner, And I just kind of kept moving up. I became a writer. I wrote for the anchors. I was a producer. And I don't think I got on the air for like 3 years. So instead of going to Walla Walla or Tri-Cities or Bend, Oregon or somewhere, I just started in Seattle and eventually got on the air. And so I still remember the tape that got me noticed at ESPN was just one particular night. It was the Joe Montana to John Taylor. The 49ers beat the Bengals. I think it was February of '89. And I had a pretty good show. So I was like, fuck it. I'm going to send a tape to ESPN, see what happens. And they said, send us another one. We want to see if that was a fluke. And I just wore them down. That's the job I ended up wanting. And it took 3 or 4 more years to get there. But, it finally worked out.
Was sports media, had you considered it a bit of a fallback option for you earlier? Like, I mean, I guess not always, like, because, we discussed you worked as a garbage man and doing other jobs, but was sports media always a goal for you, or did you just kind of end up stumbling in it by seeing that newspaper ad?
Honestly, I wanted to be more serious. I wanted to do journalism, broadcasting, but not sports. Like, for having played sports all my life, it felt like personally, like a kind of a cliche, like you play it, now you're going to do like everybody does, right? And I was more interested in politics and history. I took a lot of political science and journalism and then my broadcasting core stuff. And so that was really where I wanted to be. So I was happy when I got to the local station that I was doing like local news, being the local news guy. And then we used to only have Monday through Friday. Our motto was an hour ahead of the rest because we came on at 10 o'clock. And then some of us said our other motto is if there's news on the weekends, it's news to us, because we literally did not have a weekend show, right? So one year, I've been on TV for like a year doing news reporting Monday through Friday, and they decided to add Saturday, Sunday. And Jack Eddy was the boss. He was like, you play football, you're doing sports. It was just kind of like, so that's really how I fell into doing sports. And quickly I bought into it because it was pretty fun. I'm going to Seahawks games and Husky games and Sonics and doing all these cool things. And it was also an avenue, I think, to let my personality out better than doing straight news, obviously, and got to experiment. And since we really had no supervision, it was just us. There was no big boss on the weekends there. It was almost like, in a weird way, like ESPN 2 years later was a great experimental training ground for a lot of us to kind of, here's how you do it. And I'm going to try this and try that. So I was blessed to get both chances. And, I don't like regret my path. It's a weird path for sure.
Yeah,
but
unique.
I think it's kind of unique and kind of cool that I lived all these different experiences and struggled to get here and there.
How was working with Stuart Scott at ESPN2?
Oh, it was great. I still remember I told this story in the documentary they just did on him. The first time I met him, I mean, I'd seen him on TV. I was watching what they're up to. And I came in, I'd just been hired, and I came in and I wasn't paying attention. I was looking over this way, and all of a sudden the script paper comes flying and hits me in the face. And he had just wadded up a script and like, new guy, I'm throwing a script paper at you. And I picked it up and I threw it right back at him. And they were like 10 seconds out of break or coming out of break. And we just hit it off. That was almost like a minor initiation, if you will. Like, I need to give you a hard time back and forth. We became good friends. We played flag football together. We had a little ESPN team that played down in Hartford. Stuart and I would play electric football. You might be too young for this, but little plastic men that vibrate on an aluminum board. He'd play that for hours, keep stats, get weird. But yeah, he was a good one. We did a lot of shows together, and then a lot of kind of special event type things together. But then ultimately, there was a time he and Rich were kind of partners for a few years, and I was with Dan at the time. And then, we all kind of did our own thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I think Stuart was probably the first SportsCenter anchor that I related to as a young sports fan, because when I was in elementary school, I read there was this book series called Patrick's Pals, which was a fictional book series about Patrick Ewing, Alonzo Mourning, and Dikembe Mutombo as children. And in the book, Patrick would always yell "Booyah!"
Oh, funny.
So then I heard, the first time I ever heard Stuart yell "Booyah" as a 8 or 9 year old, I was like, oh my gosh, he reads Patrick's Pals also. So like from that point on, because of that, like Stewart was always my favorite SportsCenter anchor.
I remember my favorite commercials I did was with Stewart. It was the Big Buddy program where we're supposedly giving back to the community, but we're in the basketball environment. We just become absolute jerks, stealing the ball from the kids and all. But I did one with Dikembe, and it was really out there. Those were my favorite ones that were just so far off the map. They had no basis in the other reality.
Yeah.
And it was Dikembe and I on our backs looking up at cloud shapes. And at the end, he offers me a root beer for no reason. Just like, it was really absurd. But those are some of my favorites.
How did you end up becoming Dan's co-anchor on the 11 p.m. SportsCenter and succeeding Keith Olbermann?
Honestly, I have no idea. I didn't lobby for it. I just kept on doing whatever I was doing at the time. I was doing the RPM car racing show, which I knew nothing about, which showed early. But then I, kind of acclimated. I got great help. Benny Parsons and Jerry Punch and Ryan McGee, they kind of like taught me how it worked. And I was still doing some sports centers besides that. And they I remember I think it was the summer, they rotated. They'd have, somebody sit with Dan for 5 days or 3 days, or whatever. And they were just seeing, all right, what works. They just called me in and said, we're going to offer you this. So the funny part was they had offered me a contract to stay because my first deal was coming to the end. And I turned it down thinking I was going to get it closer to the end and see if that helped provide any leverage or look anywhere else. They were amazed that I did turn that down. Then they offered me to be with Dan, but the exact same contract that I'd already turned down. And I remember I signed it because it was kind of like take it or leave it, if you want to be. And that was too good a job to pass up no matter what the money. And I remember Howard Katz was the boss back then. I called him. I said, hey, I think you kind of screwed me on this deal. Let me run this by you. I turned down this one offer to not be Dan's sidekick. Now I'm been elevated to be his sidekick, yet you didn't increase, right? Does that make any sense? And he was great. He was like, you know what? You got a point. And he changed it like over the phone. Yeah, to his credit.
Yeah, that's definitely, that's surprising that would happen. I think I remember Dan saying that he didn't pick Keith's successor, like, so he didn't pick you. But obviously he wasn't going to let ESPN replace Keith with somebody that he didn't want to work with. So he must have at least had an interest in at that time of working with you, I would imagine.
Well, it's kind of funny. He told me that same story that he said, I tried to stay out of it. Like, I don't want, it's going to offend people or it's going to cause, rifts within our building. And so I think he did it the right way. He just like, whoever you give me, I'm going to still do good shows and, we'll work together. And it was definitely a little bit, not overwhelming, but I was, Keith is a lot those are big shoes to fill, right? So they had this thing, it was them. Suddenly here's this other guy. It's, what's going on here? But, it's still whoever's the hell's out there. You're still covering that night's games. I'm doing it my way. Stewart did it his way, and it wasn't like I tried to like do something bigger than I was ever going to do. I just tried to keep doing as well. I mean, hell, half of it is just don't fuck the show up, don't do fixes, right? Like what's the doctor's oath, first do no harm, right?
Yeah.
So I was always like, get the names right, get the scores right. I didn't always do those things. I screwed up just like anybody else. In fact, I remember once when they were called in earlier, about doing it better, don't just be screwing around, don't make mistakes. And I was like, hey, if you keep me, I'm sure I'll make more mistakes, as will you. Like, everybody makes mistakes. It's a hard job. It's live. You're getting scraps of paper. Like, how do I say that name? Like it's not as easy as it sometimes looks as it comes off. It's not very rehearsed. A lot of the games, especially the 11 o'clock show that I was put on with Dan, shit's happening right then. East Coast games are just ending. West Coast games are halftime or whatever. So you got to kind of be on your toes, but you got to trust the people around you, which I always did. The producers, the researchers, like, they're the people you rely on. And all in all, it's amazing how well those shows come off, given how many they do and the frequency and all that. So kind of a credit to everybody's goal of doing it well, Are
you friendly with Keith? Because he seems like somebody who would have left a place and then maybe rooted for his successor to fail. And like, to be clear, there are a lot of people like that, I think, especially in what is an ego-driven business like TV. So do you know Keith much? Do you feel like he was rooting for the show to still succeed after he left?
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like some warmth from him. Like I don't ever feel like he would have rooted against me. He's done so many different things since anyway, right? He's had 19 different jobs and he's doing this thing now. No, I always felt like Bob Lee, Charlie Steiner, Dan, even though they're not that much older than I am, they felt older. They'd been there longer. They'd done it longer and better. And I could go to any of them all the time for either advice about building advice, how to handle things there, or even with Bob Lee, hey, help me with the English on this one, yeah, they were always like big brothers, in my opinion, all of them.
Do you have a most memorable moment from anchoring SportsCenters, or a favorite moment, something that happened that sticks out?
Oh man, there's so many. I remember the very first SportsCenter that I did was with Larry Beal, great guy, and he was like, I could just feel him like, okay, settle down. It's going to be, because you're nervous on your first one,
Sure.
even on other ones, because it does feel like a big thing. And I didn't even have those aspirations when I was in Seattle trying to get hired. I wanted to just stay in Seattle and do like feature stories or send me around the country. And, I didn't really think of myself as a SportsCenter anchor at the time. And in fact, when they hired me at first, it was like, hey, you're doing ESPN2. Don't even look over there. You're over here, But they killed our show pretty early. We had a show called Sports Night. It was sort of like SportsCenter on marijuana, I guess is the best way to, right? It was looser. We're covering X Games type stuff. It wasn't just all the meat and potatoes. But I don't know. In a weird way, my last show is my favorite show. Not because I was leaving, but just the freedom. I had to talk them into a little bit, but they let us have a pretty fun, crazy last show.
Yeah.
And it wasn't to be so vain and self-referential, but it was like I got to have some old friends on there and talk through stuff. And what I proposed that they disagreed with, I said, why don't we do the whole show, bring on these different characters, and then in the middle of talking to Marshawn, hey, Marshawn, hold up, we got a baseball highlight here. And, like really, really do it live. But that was too dangerous for them. So we taped most of those interviews.
And that was
the funny one was Fred McGriff, who I referenced billion times. I always did the Tom Amansky joke, because that commercial had run so much.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, I don't know what the hell that was. He just took the money, obviously. He was saying he showed up for a quickie little video shoot, but didn't know a lot about what the whole Amansky thing was. But man, that commercial ran forever. And then I subsequently found out the reason why it ran so much is ESPN was getting a cut of the video sales. So it's not like Tom Amansky bought $1 billion worth of ad space. He bought a certain amount, and then it was like a co-op deal, where they were getting the cut of the videos.
And the final show, that was the Aaron Rodgers, the fuck you to Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yes.
Was that something that was discussed prior, or is that something that you?
I sprung it. In fact, I didn't write anything. Those are real interviews. I'm just standing there. I was standing for most of those interviews, I think. And in my head, I was like, don't forget that one joke. And I forgot what the joke was. Then at the last second, I was like, oh, shit. So I said, hey, because Aaron had talked about crypto with me on a previous interview. And afterward, he was like, no, dude, you give put in this much and just give it a shot. It's going to boom. And so I bought some, and it was just the perfect setup. Like, hey, you talked me into buying crypto. Crypto's dying. I just got fired. Fuck you, Aaron. Yeah, it was like pretty good concept, I did sell my crypto eventually. I took a small loss, not a lot, but.
Did you were there any complaints from ESPN about that? I mean, obviously it was your last show. Like, what were they going to do? But did you from?
I think they, just like my smart list bosses, enjoyed the attention given me for the fake Masters stories. And we're like, yeah, well, at least we're in the news. And it was all harmless. Aaron knew I was joking.
Yeah.
He laughed right away. But I thought it was a pretty solid joke. I was worried they were going to try to cut it out. And instead, Derek Camogan, the producer, and the others who were involved, like, hell no, we're running the whole thing. So that was cool. We had Marshawn, I think, sitting on his sister's couch with suspect Wi-Fi. Bars were pretty low for that interview. Sue Bird, Jamal, and Fred McGriff. Like, there's others, Bill Walton would have been great. Like, although he would have just eaten the whole show, so we would have never got a second question in.
We talked about the Masters banning you or not actually banning you over a joke. Were there ever times where ESPN got mad or reprimanded you over something that you said on air? Like, I'm sure the fuck you happened in your last show. If it happened maybe 10 years earlier, maybe you would have heard something from management. So were there times that they reprimanded you or said something about something you said on air?
Dozens of times. It was like, no, but it wasn't over like, you can't do that joke. It was more, can you bring it back? You've colored outside the lines too much. But it wasn't everybody. There were other bosses, John Skipper primarily, who got me and like, no, keep doing it. This is fun. There were other bosses who were more meat and potatoes and, give us more sports facts. Stewart got, that was in the documentary. He got, because he was doing it, culturally different additionally, right? But he got smart and would just front load it with a shitload of stats, then do his booyahs. And he's like, hey, I did what you wanted, So I think we always ran that. I think some people just didn't get me, and it wasn't like an act. I think you would argue, aren't I coming across about the same as I used to on, right? Like,
yeah,
it's just how I do it, maybe a little less conventional than the next guy. But again, getting it right really, really mattered. Always has. Like, I hated mistakes. We said what? Like, the show's over and nobody caught the one mistake, and now we got it. But I do remember one particular that got edited, but I thought it was a good joke as well. It was in LA, and UNLV, my old school, was in a football bowl game. This is a long time ago, 15 years ago or something, and they'd made, what the hell was the bowl? It was down in Texas, but they hadn't been in a bowl for a while. And so in this game, there was like the weirdest rule interpretation that needed fucking half hour of explanation. Like, it was so weird. I'd never seen it. And I think I know football pretty well. And I can't even remember what the hell the example is, but the official ruling was spelled out for me. And it was so laborious to read through that nobody was going to understand it any better. So I just showed the play. That's a weird play. And I said, that play, it's sort of like how prostitution is legal in some, but not all Nevada counties. I thought there was a perfect way. Like, don't worry about the details. Just know this is a weird rule. It's sometimes legal. It's sometimes not. Now, like, you can't say prostitute on TV. I was like, why? It was like, Nevada, it's legal in some counties, just not Clark County, right? And they made me take that one out. So yeah, I lost that fight.
The prostitute joke aside, it did seem like ESPN gave you a lot of creative freedom with SportsCenter and with just the different projects that you did for them over the years. Did you feel like you were given appropriate leeway and like the creative freedom that you wanted to get from ESPN?
Well, I think anybody who likes to experiment and do different things than, and there's no knock on we did great real journalism, great real features. And I did a few of those along the way as well. But we were definitely doing, the one I referenced earlier, having Peyton Manning speak a rare form of Gaelic, that had not been on TV for us yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's funny though. Anybody who does that always feels that they're getting restrained more than should be. And then there's other people like, why is he getting away with all that? So I always felt like they didn't fully get it. And I wish they'd really just turn it in and just be funny again. But you got bosses who want their hand on it and it's their show. They have the right to approve or disapprove. There were a few things that got cut out along the way that always kind of bummed us out. I think one in particular that pops up, remember Joe Namath and the infamous incident with Susie Colbert?
Sure.
On the Monday night sidelines, I think it was, right?
Yep.
I think he said, I want to kiss you right now, or something to that effect. Years later, I was doing a story about the 100th anniversary of the advent of the forward pass. Right when football first started, there wasn't any passing. So one day they decided there's now going to be passing. So we were doing a silly story about celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the forward pass. And I got Joe Namath to say, I'd like to kiss the guy who invented the forward pass. I called Susie. I said, hey, I shot with you. We won't use it if you're mad. I didn't have time to call her ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
She's like, no, it's funny. And plus, it had been like 4 years or 5 years or whatever. We're sure it's going to make it. It's going to be a great line. They cut it out thinking that it was too saucy, right? Or reference back to a bad day. I was like, yeah, but that's so long ago. And it really wasn't even that big. It was unfortunate that happened. But
right.
if Susie's good with it and Joe's good with it, who else are we asking? Why are we asking anybody else? But all that said, like, I'm not here to rip on, whoever supervised. Like, all in all, yes, they gave me more rope because I think I was proving that I was responsible enough to have that rope to do silly things. And usually we either took a real story and kind of went off the cliff with it, or we just made up a story, like the pretend Seattle Seahawk. We had a Korean guy named Max Kim, who was an audio engineer, and we flew him to Seattle and pretended that Mike Holmgren and the Seahawks had signed him for $1 billion because they want to win now. That was the key line there. And he smokes cigarettes while he plays. And, we did that story for like 7, 8, 9 years. Every year there'd be a new iteration of the Kim Il-sung story. And, that was different. That was fun. I think sports, and it wasn't trying to rip off, but Sports Illustrated many years ago had done the fake player, right? I think it wasn't on the cover. It was Sid Finch. What was the name?
He was on he was on the cover, but I can't remember.
Baseball, I think it was.
Yeah, it was baseball.
But we were always trying to, what's something weird? Like, we did for golf.
It was Sid Finch with 2 Ds.
Yes, Sid Finch, I had it right. But yeah, kind of a nod to that, and also our own way of doing the same bit. The first episode, he's so talented he might replace Eddie Vedder, and we got Jeff Ament, their bass player for Pearl Jam, to talk about, like, Ez's got to watch out, And then the next year, this is a great personal story too. Brent Berry, what a good guy. He was with the Sonics at the time. And we come back, we're going to do another iteration of Kim Il-sung. And this time they don't like him as much because it turns out he can't play all 22 positions. And just coincidental to us flying, it was a Tuesday, a Wednesday, whatever it was, Pearl Jam had a show that night in Seattle. And the Sonics had a preseason game. Must have been September, October, whatever, right? So I go to the game, we interview Brent Berry, and he says, hey, what are you doing tonight? I said, what do you mean? I'm at your game. He said, do you want to go to Pearl Jam instead? He said, go in the locker room, grab my keys and my jeans, go to my van. I got 2 tickets. They're going to go to waste. Why don't you guys go to Pearl Jam? So my producer and I went and saw one of the epic Pearl Jam shows at Benaroya Hall. They debuted Man of the Hour, if you know that song from Big Fish. Just like all of that together, there were so many like crazy experiences that way. I think at one point, Kim Il-sung was his name we gave the Korean guy. He's hanging out with Rick Ross in Miami for no reason. Like, there were a lot of weird things. I think I'm all over the place, but it reminds me of another one. Vladimir Putin stole Robert Kraft's Super Bowl ring. That's a real story that really happened. There's some ceremony or something, and he showed him his ring, and he kept it and walked off. So we pretended that we were trying to get the ring back for the Americas, and literally went to the White House. They let us in during the press conference, and I said, I'm going to ask like a really stupid question. They say, yeah, you're fine. Just wait till the one guy, there's the guy they pointed to, when he asks his ridiculous question, it's free form at that point. And I think bin Laden had released a tape the same day. Like, it was just, the circumstance was so, like, are you kidding me? I'm going to go in there and drown on it. It's like, hey, when that guy asks his absurd question, everybody gets to do whatever they want. So I was like, asking, what will the president be doing to win back the ring? We went to the Russian embassy. We hired some actors from Upright Citizens Brigade in New York, and they did a protest at the United Nations. Like, so we had fun.
Do you still watch ESPN? Like, games aside, do you watch SportsCenter? Do you watch any of the daytime content? Do you watch what's on the network outside of games?
Yeah, I like, not every single day, and not like I gotta watch it.
Sure.
Yeah, there's like no, if you're asking like any malice or bitterness or no.
Yeah, I think also just do you enjoy the content? It's different than now than what it was, I think, 10 years ago. Maybe a little more personality driven there. So especially with the daytime content. So do you watch ESPN? Do you like the content that's there?
I like some of it, and I like some of it less than the stuff I like the most. Like any other TV, right? Like you could say the same about Netflix, but I still think the bread and butter of the place and how it succeeded through all the years was SportsCenter in particular.
Yeah,
And they still and there's no knock. Other people have their lanes; they got their big opinions, and it's not so much for me as it is what happened tonight. Show me, we always used to say we kind of are giving you tomorrow's sports section in an hour. Like nothing against newspapers. I love journalism, but you don't need tomorrow's sports section because in this 1 hour, we just told you everything big that happened, right? And the immediacy of it, Steph Curry just hit the winning shot or some guy just threw a no-hitter and 2 minutes later, we're live on TV telling you this thing that just happened. Like, there was an adrenaline to it and an immediacy to it.
Yep.
I know now because everybody has smartphones. This has been said a million times that most people know what happened or they were already watching it, right? They don't need us in the way they used to need us. But that said, it's still fun. I love hearing Scott Van Pelt's take on the day or whoever your favorite anchor is, right? NFL Live, I think, is great. I like football still my number one sport. So learning, listening, finding out the breakdowns they do. But yeah, I still think SportsCenter is still doing what it always did. In fact, in some ways more efficiently because of the technology. We can do fixes faster. They can do fixes during commercial breaks now. We used to have to stay till after the damn show was done and marry a 2-inch tape together, So, but yeah, I still watch, and there's a bunch of good stuff, and then there's stuff I don't care for quite as much.
Did you have opportunities to leave ESPN during your career there? Like you saw Rich Eisen leave for the NFL Network. You saw Dan Patrick leave for NBC. Were you looking at them at that time and saying, like, are you crazy for leaving ESPN, or did you have interest of leaving as well at times?
I think most of my threats to leave were just me gambling, like turning down a deal with no other deal in place, just like bluffing in a poker game. And it worked for a bunch of years. But I honestly, the closest I came to leaving was way back a long time ago. It was Jimmy Kimmel's partner, Daniel Kellison. He was his producer way back when. And Jimmy called and said, hey, my friend Daniel said he's looking for a guy like you for this thing he's trying to get off the ground. And I told him, why don't you call him as opposed to someone like him? So he called me. We had this meeting. And we took it to Comedy Central, and it was essentially going to be a sports center, but more fun, right? Like the Daily Show, but sports, right? That was the plan. And I thought we got it to like the 5-yard line. I thought it was happening, and then it didn't. And they ended up doing a similar thing with Norm Macdonald for a short time. I love Norm Macdonald.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it didn't take off and go longer because he's funny as hell. But yeah, I'd say that's the closest I ever came to actually leaving. It was always, this is pretty good. It's paying more than I thought I'd make previously, and I'm getting to do fun stuff. The wider world of sports. We didn't even talk about that. That was what happened after Mayne Street went away. Flew around the world for like 3 years and just did ridiculous stories on Hornoosen and the Palio and Irish road bowling and sled down a volcano in Nicaragua. And I'm leaving out a bunch of others, but we had a blast doing that.
You've done stand-up also, right? How is that as a creative outlet?
It was really a sign of desperation. I did the Caesars thing for a couple of years. This is after, I left ESPN. I did the Olympics. I mean, I've done a whole bunch of little one-off things. Right? Speaking thing here, commercial here, whatever. Did the Olympics for Peacock. That was 21, which was the 20 because of COVID, right? And I made this short film called Wiffle Ball a couple years ago, and I've been still trying. I haven't quit trying to find a way to get it out in a bigger way than it did. Excuse me. And about a year ago, I just decided, I don't even know how I came to it. I was like, what if I made the whole show bigger and I do like a half hour of stand-up followed by showing my 30-minute movie, and the whole show is a show, right? I'm in the middle of trying to push it right now. Maybe the guy listening, hey, Netflix guy, right here. Whoever, I mean, I see others. I'm not saying I'm Nate Bargatze quite yet.
Yeah.
No, Mulaney or anybody, but I've seen other, I always say my old friend Warren Thomas, who was a stand-up, rest in peace, he's like, I can be that mediocre. You know, that was always his line of, not, and you're not really not, I'm just saying, here's all the shows. I think the show I just described would fit in the middle or middle top, but not middle bottom. At least,
yeah.
I mean, that's my confidence in it. But essentially, the stand-up part is really just a bunch of childhood stories. Start with age 3, my first memory. I got burned. I was not supposed to touch the matches. Age 8, I fell in love with Mrs. Loomis. Age 11, I broke my femur, which becomes a really funny story for how stupid adults were in 1971. Mel Shiley, the football coach, my leg is on the ground. My left leg is like this, over my head, like it's asking a question. The question was, where the fuck is the ambulance, is the punchline to that. They didn't have 911 back then, or at least they didn't have it where we lived, right? We're in South King County, south of Seattle. I was like, why did they not go to somebody's house, call 0? That's how that was 911 essentially. Tell the operator, one of our young athletes, his leg is over his head right now. Could we get an ambulance? Yeah. So anyway, it's a bunch of stories like that. And then my little 30-minute movie, which is about me and Ken Griffey throwing wiffle balls, and Ken Burns is in it.
Yep.
And there you go. Like, I'm hopeful somebody, I don't know who, but I don't feel like I've quit on the try, you know, or I haven't taken it to the last try.
Yeah.
Is the way to put it. So that's one of my goals. Keep the little podcast going, see what else comes up. I'm always like fishing for something, but I'm not reporting anywhere 5 days a week. And I don't know that I want to either. Like, I kind of did the sports highlights thing already. I don't know if anybody even wants me to do that anyway. I'm happy trying to get these other things off the ground and just, here's this for a month, or here's this for 2 days, or whatever the case is.
The last thing I want to ask is if Arch Manning has the season that a lot of people are expecting in his second year as a starter for Texas, and then if the Jets have the season that a lot of people are expecting in their second year with Aaron Glenn as head coach, will Cooper Manning and the Manning family, do you think, allow Arch to be drafted by the Jets, or will they try to get him to another team?
Oh man, let's call Cooper right now. He'll answer that question. I'll say this about him. I really gain a lot of respect. I don't know him that well. You know, we work on the show together. You know, we trade notes. You know, we know each other a bit, but haven't known him for a long time. And I thought he handled, as a father, the whole season just remarkably. Like, he, you know, I wasn't there for their private conversations, but
right.
You know, I mean, he was making excuses. He just, hey, let's play again. I remember that first game was rough.
Yep.
And I sent him a note. Hey, I know you're getting lots of advice. Here's mine. Go play your second game. You know, and it's funny because he really did progress. He was getting really good toward the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
And he can throw the hell out of the ball. So who knows why it started the way it started? You know, it wasn't all on him. I think he'll have a really good season. I think they'll just let it happen. I know Eli, right? Eli, way back when he made his choice.
Right.
I would just be guessing, but I think he'll go where he goes. He's got a lot more footballs to throw.
As a Seahawks fan who just saw Sam Darnold and what he's capable of doing after leaving the Jets and getting tutored in San Francisco and Minnesota, would you advise Arch Manning to go to the Jets if that's how it played out?
I mean, the one thing I'll say is NFL is historically, teams really do turn it around fast. You see teams that seem like garbage one year, next year they're in the playoffs, the next year they're in the Super Bowl. So I wouldn't entirely, I don't want to be here to bash the Jets. They've had a rough run. Very rough. It is true. Some of these guys who were there and go elsewhere, some of it's circumstantial. I'm very happy for Sam though, because I also thought that was such a ridiculous thing that every time people talked about him, they had to bring the whole damn story back that the Jets and then the Carolina and then got intercepted against the Rams. Well, Rams are pretty good. A lot of guys got beaten by the Rams, So I love that Seattle grabbed him, and Ernest Jones, our defensive player, who was like his biggest advocate, telling everybody to go fuck themselves, and like I love it that they rallied around him, and he had the season that he had, and they did what they did. So that was a pretty fun win.
Yeah, as a Jets fan, I was very happy for Sam. Right, there was no hard feelings. I always blamed Jets more than.
Well, also how he was, I thought, so measured and classy in the way. A lot of guys would be like, and I showed that. He didn't do that at all. He's like, hey man, I kept learning. I really appreciate the New York people who always liked me. Period, and I have that association with the city and the team, and like he handled it expertly, and I think it was all very sincere as well. And there's more good things to come. I hope we can keep some of our other stars. There's a little concern about keeping the same team intact, but that happens, right? Like somebody shows up and now they deserve this much, and the cap says you can't afford all this. So, but I think they've bought into the coach, and he's a unique guy, and I think they're gonna have a bunch of good years to come.
Kenny, you were great. Thanks so much for doing the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Of course. That is Kenny Mayne. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com. and follow us at Awful Announcing.